Hey, remember the Slenderman? The creepypasta turned web series ARG turned classic indie horror game turned average sequel turned moral panic turned bad movie turned post-ironic meme? Yeah, that one. It's almost impossible to pin down what exactly makes the Slenderman such an effective bit of internet horror. The communal aspect, popularity of Let's Players and creepypasta channels around the time of its rise to prominence, just how fun the disparate mythos is to immerse yourself in, it all plays a part. But another undeniable reason for the appeal is that this is just a straight up tried and true good monster design. Slenderman is sometimes drawn kinda silly and over the top with tendrils and all this extra stuff, but the original images created by Erik Knudsen are so iconic for how simply eerie they are. He's just a tall, slim guy without a face. Now, messing around with human faces and adding and removing features is always a great way to make creepy looking monsters. This has basically been the staple for creepypasta and analog horror communities for years now, as well as being a feature in loads of more classic horror projects. This is due in part to something called the Uncanny Valley, a phenomenon noticed by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in 1970 to describe how as things become closer to looking human, there's a point just before it looks quite right where it looks eerie and unsettling. Humans have a habit of trying to look for human traits in everything, but there's a point where something doesn't quite look right and it becomes scary. You can put eyelashes on a car and decide that she's a sassy diva full of personality, but you can look at an almost human-like robot and poop your pants. The latter is an example of the Uncanny Valley. Generally meddling with facial features on a human-like creature produces an instant spook factor. Whilst the term Uncanny Valley wasn't used until 1970, there's actually quite a rich history of uncanny monsters in folklore dating back centuries, and I think it could be fun to take a look back at it, so let's do just that. Whilst specifically faceless monsters aren't common in folklore, there's an interesting path they take to come over to the Americas before eventually taking over the internet, one that's definitely worth examining. Lafcadio Hearn was basically a 19th century Chris Broad, a writer and occasional pseudo-stuntman, acting as a cultural bridge between traditional miserable European sensibilities and the island of Japan. Originally from Greece and spending his childhood in Ireland, Hearn rose to prominence after finding work in America as a writer, before his vocal support for reparations for former slave families and very public love of black women earned him a lot of backlash, and he ended up relocating to the West Indies before eventually settling in Japan in 1870. Here he would go on to teach English literature at Tokyo University, sowing the seeds of Japanese interest in traditional European folklore that would go on to inspire the aesthetics of many an anime. On top of this, he travelled and collected local legends from Japanese people, being a major source of recorded pre-meiji legends. It's from his explorations into Japanese ghost stories that we get some of the first well-known depictions of a faceless monster. In fact, the Faceless Ghost as a trope has a rich Japanese heritage. Erik Knudsen even lived in Japan when he created Slenderman. Mujina, featured in Hearn's anthology Kwaidan, is a weird story with some of the most insane tonal whiplash I've ever seen. The story goes that one night a man is walking down Kinokunizaka, which is a slope on the Akasaka Road in Tokyo. People have been avoiding this slope due to stories of hauntings for generations, but one night an old merchant chooses to make his way through. There, on the starlit path, the sounds of a nearby moat were met with gentle crying. By the side of the road, the merchant sees a young woman, finely dressed with her head in her hands, softly sobbing. The man stops to help the woman, but when she looks up at him, the moon reveals she has no face. Running away, screaming, the man takes solace at an isolated soba stand, but rather than comfort, the soba salesman just scares him again by taunting him before revealing that he also has no face. The final paragraph of Hearn's telling is hilarious. It reads, "Was it anything like this that she showed you?" cried the sober man, stroking his own face, which therewith became like unto an egg, and, simultaneously, the light went out. Reminder that this line is considered part of a classical piece of literature, so stop being so harsh on yourself and release that fanfiction, egg faces and all. There exists a debate as to what the creature in this story actually is. Yokai enthusiasts claim that whilst the creature in this story is a Mujina, which is a shape-shifting creature similar to a tanuki, the faceless monster is actually something called an Apera Bo, which is being impersonated by a shape-shifting Mujina for whatever reason. Whatever the case, through Hearn's telling, we understand that in pre-meiji Tokyo, there were legends of faceless creatures that hid out in isolated places to attempt to startle travellers, not for any reason, just for the love of the game. How common sightings were is unknown, as are the exact origins of this belief, but in under a century following Hearn's account, similar creatures would begin to be sighted overseas. Japan first made contact with Hawaii in 1806 when the Inawaka Maru, a small cargo ship, ran aground in Hawaii. The islands maintained generally good if slightly tense relations until eventually in 1866 153 Japanese people dubbed the Gagan Mono migrated to Hawaii to work the sugar plantations. To massively oversimplify things from here, subsequent waves of migration occurred over the next half a century, leading to a huge amount of crossover between Japanese and Hawaiian culture, and a large number of people with Japanese heritage living in Hawaii. To this day, Hawaii remains a popular vacation spot for Japanese tourists. However, it isn't just the people that migrated over from Japan. It seems like the ghosts got into boats and crossed the Pacific too. Hawaii has a rich history of folklore and ghost stories, but throughout the 20th century there's a notable Japanese influence, and this is especially true of faceless ghosts. Japanese obake are persistent and have developed a unique cultural identity in Hawaii, but the roots remain apparent. On the 19th of May 1959, reporter Bob Krause published an article on sightings of a faceless ghost at a drive-in theatre in Waialae. Bob Krause's column, In One Ear, which ran in the Honolulu Star Advertiser, was not a supernatural column by any means, generally just being part of the paper where you can see what's going on around town. The story goes that a woman went into the bathroom of this drive-in theatre to apply lipstick, and in the mirror saw a woman in the bathroom behind her with no face. Upon turning around, there was no woman, but the door slammed and the woman collapsed from shock, later being admitted to hospital. Though Krause never met the woman who started this rumour, stories of faceless ghosts quickly spread, with Krause meeting numerous people who had their own supposed eyewitness accounts. Numerous other people reported seeing the ghost at the drive-in, and interestingly, almost a week before Krause's now famous column, another report was published on similar sightings of faceless ghosts in schools and cemeteries. What's more, when a local radio show brought up the drive-through ghost in 1982, several people called in to report that they had seen the ghost, one woman as late as 1980. Sightings continued until the theatre's closure and subsequent demolition in 1986. Writer Glen Grant notes the similarities between the Mujina of Hearn's tale and the faceless ghosts of Hawaii, commenting that the tale is shaped by a markedly Japanese motif. However, whilst there is a traceable origin there, it's worth noting that a number of people commenting on the bathroom ghost or similar local legends were not Japanese and had no connections to Japan. Whilst yes, the legend had its origins across the Pacific, there's a universal appeal in the fear created by collective imagination, which mutated and gripped the local population as it changed to suit them. Over the years, embellishments were made to almost completely transform the myth beyond its fundamentals, with highly disparate tellings being separated by decades of cultural drift. No telling was the same. The ghost's appearance would change from telling to telling. One time, she had no legs, one time she had bright red hair. Yes, all ideas come from somewhere, and there's a pretty clear origin in this instance, but what makes this interesting is how legends warp and change across the world. Most people who played Slender, or loved No-Face in Spirited Away, or picked up a Kiyomi Hauntily Monster High doll probably don't know about Hearn's story or the Hawaiian legend, but the universality of the concept and how rapidly it was able to spread cross-culturally is evidence of just how great a monster idea this is, how well it taps into a universal uncanny fear. The same things that weirded out pre-meiji citizens of Tokyo were weirding out cinema goers in the 1980s and KSI in 2013. This goes to show that whilst yes, things do change, a truly great monster design will have a timeless, broad appeal, a subconscious yet pronounced fear factor. On top of all of this, around the same time as these ghost sightings, America gives us a glimpse into how a legend like this can originate and spread through the fascinating case of Raymond Robinson. In the mid-20th century, legends began to spread around western Pennsylvania, particularly the Pittsburgh area, of a man with no face who would wander the roads late at night, haunting abandoned industrial estates and lonesome tunnels. When taking a late-night drive down the moonlit Route 351 up past the abandoned Piney Fork Tunnel, there was a slim chance that you might see a slender figure dressed entirely in green, walking alongside the side of the road, one foot in the human world of concrete and tarmac, the other in the unknown wilderness beyond. You might stop and attempt to strike up a conversation, only to find when he turns around that the man has no face. This story spread rapidly throughout the area in the 1950s, around the same time as Hawaiians were spotting faceless ghosts, and to this day there are people who still consider the Green Man, Charlie No Face, to be a real spirit that haunts the roads of Beaver County and outer Pittsburgh. Charlie No Face is such a unique bit of American folklore because we know not only was this supposed ghost actually a real person, but we can also trace how the myth spread. It makes you wonder what other bits of mythology are simply embellished accounts of real events. How many monsters of legend were nothing more than misunderstandings of the mundane? In this instance, local reporting and accounts given by family members and friends paint a clear picture of the real story, but the same cannot be said for any of the myths that came before. The kernel of reality in this makes you wonder what the basis for any prior myth was. Charlie No Face was actually a man named Raymond Robinson. After a tragic incident with an electrical line in his childhood, Ray lost most of his face. It's a miracle he survived. He spent most of his childhood and early adult life isolated, hiding out in his family home, making belts and doormats to earn a small income, and listening to baseball games on the radio. Documentarian Tisha York says that this kind of isolated existence was not uncommon for children who grew up looking different from their peers. Eventually, conscious of his appearance but eager to step out and experience the world beyond his home, Ray would start taking walks in the dead of night, and from here the rumours of a monster would begin to spread. On hearing of this monster, people would be extremely cruel to Ray. They would track him down and hit him with their cars, or pick him up and drop him off in the middle of nowhere, being fearful of his appearance or just looking to pick on a lonely blind man. However, over time as the legend spread, more and more people who came looking for the Green Man ended up meeting and getting to know Ray Robinson. Simultaneously, a legend of a faceless ghost spread around Pennsylvania and a close-knit community formed around the kind-hearted Ray. Stories would tell you of a grotesque monster, but this could not be further from the truth. Ray was incredibly friendly. He liked to sit and smoke and talk the night away with friends. He was extremely passionate about baseball. He provided a shoulder to cry on and a comforting presence to numerous people who knew him well. One man claims that Ray was instrumental in supporting him following his brother's death in the Vietnam War. When Ray passed away in 1985, there was a public outpouring of support. Meanwhile, Charlie continued to develop in the popular consciousness, stories of a strange green faceless ghost wandering the road still being told from parent to child. Like Mothman or the Jersey Devil, the Green Man became a highly localized American myth. The fabrication took on a life of its own and has in many ways overshadowed the true story it sprung up from. This is an interesting story as it recontextualizes everything spoken about so far. Just how much truth is there in fiction? How many tall tales are grounded in reality, and how many are just that, tall tales? It's usually pretty hard to know. But in our final example, luckily, we do. It's entirely made up, with no basis in reality, but that doesn't stop it from going on to be the most famous monster in the lineup. We know exactly what the Slenderman is and who created it, yet despite that there is such a powerful pull to faceless creatures that people still report sightings. Where previously sightings and stories tended to be isolated to a single location, only moving with migratory patterns or to adapt to outlying tragedies, the impact of this most recent faceless ghost is a uniquely online presence. Slenderman is a modern monster, one of the first truly explosive instances of folklore, or rather fake lore, spread not within a physical community but rather the internet, the sum knowledge of all human ideas in your hands, creating funny looking guys. Rather than being an isolated example shaped by local sensibilities, Slenderman is many things to many communities. They feature or serve as an inspiration in games, fan films, short stories, Minecraft mobs. They're quite literally everywhere. This is one of the greatest strengths of this creation. Slenderman is a transmedia myth. They exist in numerous formats and mediums, and as a result they broach a broad audience with varying degrees of interactivity. Whilst the story mimics traditional oral folklore, the spread and reach is much farther and much faster. Rather than slowly spreading through word of mouth or from person to person, usually within a single place, the internet allows stories to reach a wide breadth of people, and so a uniquely uncanny, uniquely terrifying kind of monster can capture the imagination of untold millions. A creature with no face, hardly any established canon or explicitly defined consistent motive, has unparalleled reach because it invites the innate creativity within all of us. A crucial difference here is that this folklore has never operated on the illusion that it is in any way real, yet it taps into the same innate fear as those that have treated themselves as though they were. Whilst it doesn't quite have the same oomph as something without a clearly defined origin point, the strength of the design and concept alone creates a veneer of believability and authenticity. Today, largely due to this particular instance, the faceless monster is an ever-looming thought, brought to life through one of the most prevalent cases of internet folklore. Looking back, it's interesting to see the transformation from highly localized legends to disparate accounts in varying places to an international sensation. We've looked at potential ways these myths start and just how variant they can be in their believability and origin. Now, looking at the rise of internet horror and creepypasta, it's in many ways a brilliant thing that stories can be shared so universally and are so communal, but it's also a bit sad knowing that these stories are no longer just fun local legends and instead intellectual properties to be used as marketing fodder for the broadest possible audience. From Mujina to Slender, we see not just a change in how stories spread, but also in how our monsters are presented to us, how even our deepest fears lurking in our subconscious are subject to becoming memes or marketable plushies. What once was a century-spanning canon can be reduced to a sporadic series of trends. Horror is more accessible than ever, but also we understand it better than ever before, and overexposure and over-explanation means that things that were once timeless legends now have a shelf life, and it's increasingly difficult to curate unique niches within the space. It's great to see so many stories, and a shame that so many only get their 5 minutes of fame. This is neither negative nor positive, in my opinion, just the nebulous nature of storytelling we're met with the passage of time and slow march of progress. Do you still have any local legends around where you live? Do you have a favourite creepypasta? Feel free to share your thoughts, there's a lot of dialogue to be had here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.